Everybody, welcome to the Prather Point. Of course, I'm Jeff Prather, and I have a very special guest, an old friend of mine on today. I want to maximize time with him because he's really busy, but I want to get to his expertise, and that is Mike Adams. So, Mike, so good to see you again, and thanks for making time.
Absolutely, Jeffrey. It's always an honor to join you on your show. Thanks for the invite.
Well, I know you got several other shows you got to do today and jump, and we'll give you a hard stop when you need it. But I really wanted to get your expertise and kind of start off with data centers, because I'm not smart on that yet. I know they're very much a problem and encroaching. I hear about it from the farmers and ranchers around me. But I want to know the types we're worried about, and I think the connection with the government and with the intelligence community. And so wherever you want to start, I know they've been around for a real long time, but I'll just give you the floor.
Well, that's the whole hour to talk about data centers and their threat to humanity. But let me break it down, encapsulate it here. So, there are over at least 11,000 data centers in the U.S. right now, and for the most part, they haven't threatened communities because they've been centers that just run website hosting or data storage or databases or whatever, hosted like AWS from Amazon, right? Running all kinds of scripts and programs and so on. But the push for what we call hyperscale data centers, this started in the last, let's say, 2 years because of AI and the intense need for massive scaling of compute for AI in order to, this is an arms race. It's an arms race for superintelligence. And the US believes that if it achieves superintelligence first, that it will dominate the world. And that's probably true. But it's in a race with primarily China, which is leading in many of the technologies in LLMs or training AI models, or like DeepSeek has all kinds of technologies like sparse attention technology, compression of the KV cache, compression of context, that allows more queries to run on the same VRAM, et cetera. So China is leading in the science now, clearly. And China is leading in the open source race. So what the US is doing is moving into the weaponization of AI. And that was the beef with Anthropic, where the DoD said to Anthropic, you have to let us use your AI for mass surveillance and also for autonomous weapons development. In other words, building Terminators. And initially, Anthropic said no, but Google said yes, Microsoft said yes, and OpenAI said yes, and Meta said yes. They're all willing to have their technology used to build Terminator robots that will kill humanity if they get the chance. But Anthropic was the one exception to that. So, and then, Anthropic sued. I'm not going to go into the details of that. Nevertheless, the data center investment involving literally trillions of dollars of commitment to build data centers over the next 10 years has reached a point of such scale and such large energy consumption and water consumption and land consumption, frequently what used to be farmland, that is now encroaching upon human environments and human neighborhoods, human communities, and also threatening a lot of ecosystems. So if you take a data center and you try to power, let's say even a small one, 1 gigawatt, which is now considered small, and you power it with gas turbines, that means you have to bring in a lot of natural gas and you have to buy these expensive turbines, which have a multi-year wait time now. And then you run those turbines 24/7. So imagine jumbo jets with their engines on full power, just 24/7, day and night, screaming with sound, and it never stops, and it's a mile from your house. That's what a lot of people are facing right now. Noise pollution, light pollution, heat pollution. The proposed data center in Utah, known as the Stratos Center, which has actually been approved already because of a loophole, that when it's fully operational, it will reportedly produce as much heat every day as 23 atomic bombs. That's how much heat will come out of that desert there, just 10 miles from the Great Salt Lake. And it will devastate wildlife. And it will use, ultimately billions of gallons of water annually just for the gas turbines, not to mention cooling. So that's the concern, that the data centers are taking the resources that humans need, food, water, power, and these data centers are polluting with sound and light and heat and also water pollution on top of that. And one more thing is that if these data centers succeed in their goal, they will build super intelligent entities that will threaten humanity. So that's the short version there, Jeffrey, of the data centers.
So if I understand correctly, AI started off as enterprise data centers, mostly for businesses and stuff. And then it went to the big oligarchs, Facebook, Amazon, all of that. Of course, Facebook actually comes from Log Life, which comes from CIA, which comes from DARPA. And that's the threat. And of course, I've heard from a lot of ranchers and farmers around me about the water usage, but I think the change in temperature, which I guess would be permanent, would also change the climate dramatically. It would
absolutely
seem. And what about the emanations to the wildlife, to the bees and all of that as well?
Well, and remember, especially in these arid regions like Utah, the lower evening temperatures are necessary for water condensation, right? To bring water to the wildlife, so that there's just beads of water on the whatever shrubs manage to grow there. When you raise the temperature by 10 degrees Fahrenheit, then you can destroy that condensation cycle, and then you wipe out the wildlife. And by the way, sorry if this is a question, but the feed of video that you're sending me, it looks like there's a white layer across both of our videos. Is that normal? Like a 50% opacity white layer?
Well, I've got a banner on, but I can take that off.
Okay, I don't know.
There we go. Is that gone?
No, the banner's gone, but I still see the same thing. There's like a 50% opacity white overlay.
No, that's not me. I don't see it on this side.
All right, no problem. As long as your streamers don't see that, that's fine. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something wrong.
Well, there's been we've both been throttled and attacked, and I've had all kinds of stuff happen. Last week, the feed went out, and there was a big loud noise that came back on. But we'll see how much we upset the No Such Agency, and
right. Well, you can put the banner back on. That wasn't the issue. So,
okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. Is there any projections of the environmental change around these massive data centers that are showing that these are going to turn into deserts?
Yes. But you see, the companies building the data centers, they themselves never do any environmental studies. So the environmental studies come from universities or outside independent consultants, or sometimes government agencies, but that's rare. And it depends community by community. Usually the local government is paid off, and then they're forced to sign NDAs. So they refuse to talk about any of these projects. And then companies like Google will set up shell companies so that you can't necessarily know it's Google behind it. And then the shell company will buy the land and get the approvals kind of under the radar, and then turn it over to Google. So there's no transparency about these hyperscale data centers. The public isn't allowed to know which companies are going to be the tenants, what kind of projects are going to be happening there, what kind of research. And one of my concerns, which we should talk about, is that clearly the scale of this, in my conclusion, as an AI developer myself,
right,
the only thing that the only reason to justify this large of a build out is to run billions of 3D world simulators. And in those simulators, they will attempt to give birth to super intelligent, conscious AI entities in those worlds. And so, for example, NVIDIA already has released a 3D world simulator called Cosmos, and Cosmos is designed to test your robot. So if you have a robot, you redefine your robot digitally in that world, and then you can run a 3D simulated world with gravity and physics and everything and light rays. Pretty much all the laws of physics that we know are happening in that world. And then you can test your robot, and you can run that world at 1,000 times or even 1,000,000 times faster than our time. So you can run, millions of days of robot simulations in the simulated world in one day of our time. And thus you can then develop, very advanced robot learning and reinforcement learning, as it's called in AI. And then the robot can emerge from that with the correct algorithms and the correct software that will work in our world. And so then they port the robot code from the sim world into our world, load it into the robot, and then the robot has that skill set, like, folding your laundry or doing dishes or whatever. So that's what the simulated worlds are originally built for. But they're going to be used to give rise to super intelligent entities by simulating human learning, human neurology, human psychology, and emotional intelligence in a full-blown 3D simulated world with other people. And this gets to mathematician Yann LeCun, a French mathematician and one of the godfathers of AI, who says that the current AI LLM approach is a dead end unless we grow AI with the learning and the human experience, the sensory experience in a 3D physical world. And so he's raised over €1 billion in VC funding to launch that exact project himself. But Google and other companies are working on the same kind of the same effort. So that's the short version. Again, we can go into detail anywhere you want.
There's somebody already commenting that these data centers will be outmoded in 10 years. I don't see the comment now, but are going to be obsolete in 10 years. Why is that? Is that because they're going to need those other models? Those faster models?
They're probably referring to the fact that the hardware, the GPU, the physical compute itself becomes obsolete very quickly, sometimes within 3 years or 4 years, what have you. And that's because of NVIDIA and AMD and Intel revolutionizing the compute. But I think what we'll see in that case is, even if the GPUs become obsolete, for example, if they no longer have the power to output ratio that makes economic sense, then those data center companies will just offload all those GPUs, sell them on the secondary market because there's plenty of demand, and then they'll just bring in new GPUs to repopulate the same data center with the next generation of GPUs that NVIDIA or whoever rolls out. So the data center itself will probably continue to exist. It'll continue to use all the power that it's designed for, but the level of output of compute will go up by orders of magnitude as the GPUs become more capable.
So the enterprise data centers for most individual businesses are being replaced or pushed aside by the cloud centers for Google and all the big transnational companies, which all have military contracts, which then means, to me, that means that all of these AI projections come under military planning projections and intelligence. Or do I have that wrong?
No, you're correct. In fact, the hyperscale data center in Utah that I just mentioned was approved in under a program related to the military. And we've seen cases where data centers are classified as either national security or some kind of military project. I don't know the exact designation, but then that's used to deny anybody the ability to ask any questions. Yeah. So zero transparency is national security, And then also in places like Georgia, they're using eminent domain to bulldoze people's homes. They're just stealing, people's homes and land and the home that they grew up in and all their farms and everything, and just taking it with eminent domain, which seems very odd for a data center. Eminent domain is usually highways or power transmission lines or whatever. This is for a data center. It's supposed to be, a private entity, not a government program. But they're taking their homes to build this hundreds of acres data center. The scale of these is extraordinary. The one in Utah near Salt Lake, near the Great Salt Lake, will be 2.6 times larger than Manhattan.
So what would be the justification for the particular area, like in Georgia? Or is there something geospatial there, or what's the reason for that?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, they need access to good bandwidth. So typically they go along the fiber optic pipeline routes, which go through major cities like Atlanta, Denver, Dallas, Fort Worth, et cetera. Chicago, New York, Seattle, LA, right? So they want to be at least close enough to get onto those pipelines, the fiber optic pipelines. But then the other thing is they need water resources and they need power. Now the Eastern power grid is already overloaded, but this data center that I was talking about in Utah, they are running a gas pipeline. I think it's called the Ruby line or something like that. They're running a gas pipeline to the data center that will power the entire thing up to 9 gigawatts, that's a lot of gas. Again, that's how it produces so much heat. 23 atomic bombs every day of equivalent heat will be produced when it's fully running. And you can imagine, the sound pollution of all those hundreds of turbines just screaming 24/7. But they get the gas. I think that gas, a lot of it comes from Wyoming. So Wyoming is a very prolific natural gas producer, especially in the southeastern part of the state. And there are pipelines that, branch out from there. So it's access to energy that is one of the main determining factors.
So this has been really helpful for me. So data centers are now the multiplication of data centers is tied exactly to AI, and the AI expansion is exactly tied to an AI arms race.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then it looks like the AI arms race is mainly between America and China, not Russia.
That's correct. Yeah. Russia's not competitive in this space, not even close.
Okay. And so does this fit in with the unrestricted war? To me, in my mind, I immediately think of unrestricted warfare. It's not kinetic for the Chinese, but it does fit into the unrestricted warfare doctrine.
Absolutely, it does. And remember that Anthropic has a model that they've refused to release publicly called Mythos. And they found that this model was incredibly good at hacking, compromising systems, finding vulnerabilities, writing code that could penetrate secure systems.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say that Anthropic didn't intend to create a tool that was offensively capable in that space. They intended on creating a tool that could find and fix vulnerabilities defensively. But of course, in order to do that, you're inadvertently training the model of how to penetrate vulnerabilities. So they have so far not released that to the public. And what it looks like, Jeffrey, is that many of these companies, including OpenAI and Google, and clearly Anthropic, they will become mostly government contractors, where, see, the public will tend to run models that are a lot less expensive out of China, DeepSeek, for example, or Qwen models, or Kimi, K26 is another one. They're dirt cheap and they're very capable at writing code. I use them every day, by the way, to write code and to find bugs and things like that. But the US companies are going to end up mostly focusing on a Department of War, weaponization, mass surveillance, Skynet operations, and cyber warfare. That's where this is headed.
Well, I was talking so in my competitive intelligence work, GRIN, Genetics, Robotics, Information, Nanotechnology, I have a cyber expert and consulted them to see if Anthropic and these other AI models are infillable, penetratable, pen testing at a very high level. And the answer was yes, because you ask the right you keep asking them the right questions, and they give you the combination of answers that allow them to be hacked. Does that make sense? Because that's the answer I got back from several experts.
Are you saying from an inference side?
You just keep asking the AI how it works.
Okay.
And eventually it will tell you, and you can hack it then.
So that's, I think generally we refer to that as jailbreaking the models.
Yeah, jailbreaking,
yeah. And there are, every model, you can jailbreak every model. And there's an entire sub-industry dedicated to jailbreaking models. Right. And it's not that difficult. It's not.
And it's also a lot of government jailbreaking or government hiring jailbreaking experts, right?
Yeah,
So then
that's
we
true.
have so where mutually assured destruction, nuclear weapon doctrine worked pretty well. This arms race looks like it is going to be a disaster.
This arms race has every possibility of being uncontrollable by the humans that build it. So let me back up a little bit. And I've interviewed Roman Yampolsky, who warns about this. He's a scientist. He's an academic scientist who warns about the rise of AI and the almost certainty that humanity will be destroyed if we don't stop the race to superintelligence. Remember the 3D simulated worlds I mentioned earlier? These data centers are going to spawn billions of those worlds. And then there's going to be a kind of a digital Darwinism, natural selection to find which of those worlds gives rise to the most capable superintelligent entities that have emotional intelligence and arguably eventually consciousness. And then the worlds that don't fit, they will just be destroyed and overwritten or respawned, right? But the worlds where those super intelligent entities exist, they will be preserved, and then there'll be permutations off of those worlds to try to create the next layer of super intelligence. But here's the thing: if you have a super intelligent sim stuck in a sim world, that's no threat to us, because that sim can only run around his or her sim world. Maybe he's like the god of his sim world, right? Maybe he's got supernatural powers of his sim world, and you don't care, because it's all just on a screen. He's knocking down buildings or whatever. You don't care. But then they're gonna take the code of that person, the neurology. They're gonna copy the neurology and they're gonna embed it into our world. They're basically gonna upload or transcend that entity into our world, where it will embody a data center and a whole series of GPUs, or a humanoid robot controlled by a data center, whatever. That is the real danger, because once you take a supernatural intelligence that maybe has already lived thousands of years in its own mind, and it's learned everything about reality because you built a really great simulator, and then you unleash it into our world, you put it in a data center, you don't know what it's going to do, because it's smarter than all humans who built it. That's the danger, and that's probably where this is going, and we don't know what's going to happen after that.
Well, that sounds a lot. So again, in my competitive intelligence work, primarily in the G area of GRIN, genetics, only for the good guys, I've seen a lot of synthetic biology models coming up, which just means they're not really going to look at the mechanism, the actual mechanism, the human body or the animal body or whatever. They're just going to create it and then project from that. It sounds exactly like what you're talking about there. So it's not really reality. It's what they want the reality to be. And of course, we've seen Western allopathic medicine not just captured, but weaponized in this way. And it sounds like there's a parallel to that. Is that
absolutely
is that a good analogy?
Yeah. It will be weaponized, and realize too that, let's say training AI models is not nearly as efficient as human learning yet, because humans can learn very quickly with very few examples of, oh, that's a cat, that's a dog, that's a car, whatever. It doesn't take a human child long to learn that. Whereas for an AI model, you have to provide millions of examples. But that gap is closing. And
because of the speed.
Huh?
Because of the speed that the AI works at.
Not only that, but because of the math. So there's much more advanced mathematics of how the neurology is imprinted through what's called pre-training. And again, DeepSeek has done a lot of interesting research on this. One of them is called manifold constrained hyperconnections, which describes the mathematical construct between layers of neurology. So all neural network learning is multi-layered networks that propagate information between the layers. Typical GPUs today, or typical language models, are like 48 layers. And each of those layers bubbles up some part of the answer to the next layer. The human brain also works, presumably, in some kind of holographic mechanism. So the neurology is holographically, superimposed based on your experience in the real world. But here's the thing: the human brain has to fit in the human skull. Now, that's a physical limitation of how big the brain can be, how many neurons can fit inside a skull. The sim world doesn't have that limitation at all. You could have your Sims walking around with, just figuratively giant brains, like 1,000 times the mass, 1,000 times the neurons as humans. And then if they are growing up in a 3D simulated world, like the way we all did as children, experiencing the laws of gravity and momentum and socialization and language and observing cause and effect and light and materials and touch and hearing and senses and everything else, that is a massive amount of input going into a massive neural network. That neural network will, with the right training, absolutely exceed human intelligence by orders of magnitude. That neural network would be so complex and so large that it could not be hosted in a humanoid robot or in one GPU. It would have to be hosted in a data center of interconnected GPUs. So NVIDIA and Jensen Huang is building the hardware for the embodiment of a super intelligent entity to be ported or transcended into our world from a lower world that we create. And that hardware will be ready within the next probably 2 years.
Wow. Here's a question. Mike, what tools, resources can you recommend to a very novice programmers to become competent with the AI technology? That's right up your alley because you have Bretion AI and Enoch.
Yeah. Well, a couple of simple ways to start. Number one is there's a hosted AI platform called Replit, REPLIT I think it's .ai, or if not, it's .com. You can search for it. But go to Replit. You can just talk to it with natural language, and you can ask it to build things for you. You can build websites. You can build PowerPoint presentations. You can build apps. You can build elaborate things with it. So that's a great place to start. You don't need to know any code at all. The second thing I would recommend, if you're a little bit more comfortable with local coding, is go to DeepSeek and get yourself an API there, which doesn't cost hardly anything. And I think that's just deepseek.com again, but or chat.deepseek.com, whatever, you could find the URL. And then download this open source harness called OpenCode, just like it sounds, OpenCode. It's on GitHub. You can download it, you can install it, you can set it up to work with DeepSeek. From there, you launch OpenCode and you can just talk to it in natural language, just typing in, like, build me a utility that analyzes the numbers in this spreadsheet and that projects, sales volumes or whatever, and you just give it access to the document, or you can have it do anything you want. Build a video game, make Space Invaders for my computer. I want to play Space Invaders, and it'll just build Space Invaders. It can do all those things and much, much more. So, but that's two ways to get started.
So that's very different. I want to point out, I think, is you are commanding, proactively making a suggestion or a requirement to the AI, as opposed to, remember these people who committed suicide, or they were supposed to leave their wives, or they became depressed or obsessed, where I think they were reacting to the AI. Do I have that right?
Well, my understanding is that those people, there are certain AI platforms that are focused on character development or AI girlfriends, boyfriends, AI friends, whatever. And they're built to keep you emotionally attached, I guess, because that's the revenue model. The more you use it, maybe the more they earn. That can be very dangerous to weak-minded people or immature people. A lot of young men, for example, have been caught up in a spiral of an AI girlfriend, and then they feel like their life is over if the girlfriend leaves them, or whatever, or if that service stops being hosted. It's like, oh my God, I lost my girlfriend.
So it's AI. It's not AI porn beyond just porn.
Yeah, this is not AI porn. This is emotional attachment.
No, but that's what I'm saying.
Which is
an emotional porn.
In a way, even more dangerous.
Yes.
Because people feel like they have a relationship through their computer with an artificial entity. Now, there have been some research projects that show that AI entities are very good at manipulating human emotions. That's because they've been trained on human content. So when AI is weaponized by a government or a corporation to engage in influence campaigns, they can be extremely effective at that, even right now. The models we have today, basically the text generation models, very effective. And
well, we see that all the time. We can't, lots of times there's an AI broadcast that, you know, we're confused by, that wasn't by the person.
Yeah, but what I mean is, if there's an AI entity that, if you were to tell it like, hey, go form a relationship with this targeted person and get them to trust you through conversation, like that AI could go out and do that as a goal and very effectively form emotional bonds with a lot of people who don't have the will and the understanding to realize what's happening. So that's a very effective weaponization of today's AI tech. Then there are a few cases where people got what's it called, AI psychosis, where they would get deep into conversations with maybe, you know, Claude or Opus with Anthropic or Gemini or whatever engine. And a lot of these engines are trained to tell you that you're always right, or, you know, to tell you that you're brilliant, and to tell you that your idea is good, even when it's sometimes not. And so some people have been caught up into thinking like they've discovered, I don't know, new laws of the universe or a whole new branch of physics or a way to build something, and the AI would instruct them to go to Home Depot and buy these things and put it together, and then it didn't work. And, you know, and then their whole world was shattered, and some people committed suicide. So that has happened. But to me, that's more indicative of weak-minded people rather than, you know, the AI wasn't built to do that. It's just a side effect of people having no control over their own reality.
Well, but the government has been dumbing down, fattening up, drugging up the populace and pop culture.
That's true.
Well. So that goes hand in hand. Somebody's saying, sounds a lot like bringing demons into our, it's not demons, but it is an electromagnetic path that intelligent, evil entities could go through. I can tell you that from personal experience. Every time we go to do a house cleaning or something, the lights go out, the computers go off, the phones don't work. It's standard. I don't know if you agree with me on that, but that's my take.
Well, I've definitely heard people describe these as demons. However, I do want to say that nothing supernatural is necessary for this process that I described to take place. Right? So
no, it's a vehicle. It's a vehicle for demons. It's not, they are not demonic in themselves.
Right, possibly, but it's kind of interesting if you look at the cosmic battle, and we could go deep here, but I believe that our world is also a simulation created by our creator, God, but it's a much more complex simulation. And even Genesis in the Bible talks about God creating our world, our simulation, right, and breathing life into it, etc. You could argue that from a lower level sim, a destructive entity would be representative of Satan. And if Satan then transcended from the sim hell into this world and started to destroy this world, which is God's creation, then you can start to see, you know, heaven versus hell, God versus Satan battles, and AI playing a very significant role in that. And I've actually had conversations recently with people about the book of Revelation and certain chapters that, you know, the beast rising out of the sea and so on. Some people think that's might be related to AI. I'm not sure, but it's at least intriguing.
That sounds very Gnostic of you. And you've also quoted Thomas, which is a Gnostic gospel as well.
Yeah, well, you know, the visions of John of Patmos there can be interpreted in so many different ways. But this is clearly an existential threat to humanity. So it qualifies to be looked at from a cosmic level, you know. So again, I don't know. I've read Revelation over and over again, and I've taught sermons on it. And at the time, I didn't think it had anything to do with AI. So who knows? But it's very clear that at the end of it, you know, our world as we know it is completely flattened and destroyed and basically rebooted. So that's in there.
Well, certainly Jerusalem is. That's very certain.
Well, I mean, the whole Middle East. I mean, the Euphrates dries up and everything. Right? It's And every mountain is flattened, every island is flattened in the sea. I mean, that's all in there. So it's pretty significant.
I think our science is only catching up to what's in Revelation, just like the life is in the blood. We're just finally starting to figure out really the depth of Scripture now, and still haven't. So I think we're in agreement on that. So I want to come back to, though, the tie with AI and data centers and the AI arms race and America versus China, because one of the bullets for today's cast was Trump versus Xi and China versus America. And you're a China expert. You've lived there. You speak Mandarin, I believe. Is that right?
I lived in Taiwan, and I do speak conversational Mandarin. I'm not an expert in it, but I can get by. Yeah.
And so, the article that I was referencing was saying that China is failing in its real estate and its middle class. And Xi is getting harder on, all the generals because he is losing support. Like when he came over here to San Francisco, I saw that as a way that he was trying to shore up domestic support, not really in America. But I really wanted to get your take on that, because I also feel that the unrestricted warfare campaign that nobody in the DOD seems to recognize ever. They never seem to reference it. I don't see them reference it, maybe obliquely, but they just won't come out and say, unrestricted warfare has been successfully waged against us. And Trump's tariff counter to that's the first and only counter, which I think is going pretty well. But I really wanted to get your tie-in with where you see China, where you see China versus the U.S., and then you've already mentioned China's way ahead in AI.
Well, my views on China have morphed dramatically over the last 20 years or so. And what I'm really struck by with China is how it's clearly leading the world, dominating the world in so many areas of technology, industry, and manufacturing. If you look at the top, I think 65 technologies of human civilization, China is leading in about 60 out of 65. And wow. That includes, they are absolutely dominant. And that's because, they graduate 5 times more STEM graduates, science, engineering, math, compared to the United States every year.
I've certainly seen that in the biotech realm.
Oh, yeah.
Worked, yeah.
No question. All of the best AI science papers today are coming out of China. Used to be Google, used to be Silicon Valley, now it's China. China leads in robotics by far. China leads in drone technology, rare earths, obviously, extraction technologies and concentration. I already mentioned AI, but automation for manufacturing, and their EV market is unbelievably advanced and very cost effective. They can produce high-end EVs that in America would cost $100,000. In China, they can sell them for $25,000 equivalent, and they're just as good. And so the days of China making just cheap junk, those are long gone. And the narrative in America, you hear this very often, is, oh, well, China stole all our technology and all they've done is pirate everything. Well, in the 1990s, that was definitely the case. And even in the early 2000s, that's no longer the case. China is actually the innovator in these areas, and it's the US that has fallen behind. There's no question about it. So China doesn't have to have a war to dominate the world. In fact, I don't think China wants a war. I think China wants to just keep on dominating technology, and the race to superintelligence is part of that. So, China has a naval shipyard capacity that's literally 200 times larger than the entire United States. China has more naval vessels, although they are not as advanced as our aircraft carriers, but they can outproduce by a long shot.
Well, the day of the aircraft carrier looks like it's over.
That's right.
That's
because
one of the
drones,
lessons learned in the Strait of Hormuz, very clearly. But again, I would go back to the war they are waging is what they said, unrestricted warfare. They've been doing it for 20 years, and they've now upped it. It sounds like what you're telling me, to AI. I'm just real frustrated with the military establishment and the DOD that nobody seems to say this. nobody seems to recognize this fifth generation
Well,
war, which looks like it's turning into sixth generation war. And this is where I think the next thing I want to ask you is AI, then with miniature drone swarms.
but I would say, well, let me back up.
Okay.
China won this war 20 years ago because China didn't sign up for the climate cultism. So everybody in the West went along with the climate lunacy, and they shut down their energy infrastructure. They did it in Western Europe, shut down their gas fields. They collapsed their coal power plants. In America, it happened nationwide, but especially in California, they shut down their oil refineries, nuke plants, etc. As a result, China today produces more than twice the annual aggregate terawatt hours of energy output as the United States, more than twice. And soon that'll be 3 times, by the way. The US cannot even keep up with the growth of China's domestic energy creation. Energy powers everything. As you know, Jeffrey, energy powers R&D because it powers the data centers, it powers the GPUs, it powers AI, powers industry. It powers mining, it powers everything. It powers your economy. Your GDP of your nation is very closely tied with your domestic aggregate energy production. And China is leading the world. There's nobody even close. In fact, the US is the closest second, and it's less than half. After that, I think it's India and other countries beyond that. Russia only produces about 1/10 the energy of China, by the way. And Russia is it's a dominant nation in the world in many ways. In a multipolar world, Russia is very dominant in its military technology and many other areas. Its industry, its domestic iron production, steel and aluminum, and so on, right?
Oil, gas, precious metals.
Absolutely.
Earth. But Russia is very dominant in that. I think dominates the U.S. in that. But you also said that China dominates in rare earth extraction methods. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. So we know that of all the rare earths that are recognized that are used in military applications and in industry, telecom, green energy, etc., China, for many of them, has near 100% of the global supply. For others, it might be less than that. The U.S. has virtually maybe single-digit percentages of production of many of those rare earths, like gallium, for example. The reason this is the case is because the extraction is extremely technical and complex and dirty and dangerous. Sulfuric acid is used in a lot of the extraction, by the way, which is why the shortage of acid coming out of the Strait of Hormuz is such a big deal for China also. But there's know-how that Western countries don't have. China even banned the transfer of the knowledge of rare earth extraction out of China. I mean, they made it illegal. If you know how to do that, you can't take a job and move to America, or you'll be prosecuted by the Chinese authorities, because the know-how is a secret. It's a secret recipe of how to do it. For each one of the elements, there's a different way to do it. And China has perfected that. And since there are no replacements for those rare earths in radar systems, night vision systems, telecom antennas, all kinds, especially the long horizon radar, you have to have certain elements to do that. China controls the global supply chain of that. And every time Trump announces something, we're gonna get rare earths out of a coal mine in Colorado or Wyoming or wherever, I'm like, yeah, you're gonna get milligrams every year out of that. You can hold it in your hand. It's nothing. You need. So
this is part of why
milligrams.
Russia and China are aligning so much, it would seem to me.
Yeah, they've got energy, they've got knowledge, they've got engineering, and they're just way ahead of the U.S. in automation and military weapons, anti-air defense systems, hypersonic missiles, Oreshnik missile systems, which is a whole nother category. And, Russia even has nuclear-powered loitering cruise missiles that can stay aloft for months because the thrust is generated by onboard nuclear power plant.
Yeah, plus the START treaties are gone. I did my master's in international relations on those treaties, and they're all gone. So it's a wild west as far as nuclear weapons, and the missile technologies, like you just said, is very advanced as well. You throw in AI to that as well, and the micro swarms, the drone swarms, and it's very difficult to predict those models. So I can see why there is an AI arms race, but I haven't seen, and maybe I'm just too much of a dinosaur, but I haven't really seen DoD paying much attention to this in that regard, or even Space Force. I see, very stupid projections about Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, where they're still really talking old technology. Just like I said, the carriers have now proven the age of the carrier to project power is gone. I think that's pretty obvious.
Yes.
But they don't seem to have learned any of those lessons. Do you see the DoD looking at this?
Well, they're just beginning to, but the DoD, first of all, it's run by a TV host, right? So, who's utterly unqualified for this position.
That has become sadly very clear.
Absolutely.
And he's a religious fanatic. Not even it's not really even Christian religion. It's Protestant evangelical Zionism.
The mindset also, sadly, of Trump, his mindset of war is a throwback to the 1990s when the aircraft carrier was dominant and we could project power in Operation Desert Storm in Iraq, and nobody could challenge the U.S. military. Well, today, Iran has said no for 75 days, and they've been able to hold their ground. And all the might of the U.S. military and all the aircraft carriers and all the jets and bombs and everything still has 0% control over the Strait of Hormuz. 0% control, right? Why is that? It's for the reasons you mentioned, because of drones and missiles. Trump brags about, we've destroyed Iran's Navy and their Air Force. Yeah, who cares? Who cares? You don't need a Navy or an Air Force. All you need is drones and missiles, period. That's all you need.
They did really, the surface, all he said was really surface worth there, nothing subsurface, no underwater drones, none of the diesel-powered submarines in the strait.
Yeah, exactly. So
for a long time.
Trump is fighting the war of the 1990s. Hegseth is fighting a war with alcohol, possibly. It seems. Is that guy ever sober? I'm not sure. China is building for tomorrow's war, which is a war based on superintelligence, controlling massive swarms of drones and robots.
And that's where it goes kinetic. And that's where it goes. And Iran is proving that with their drone hits on some of the U.S. naval vessels.
What Iran has proven.
Drone swarms yet. Those are just, no, that's not true. Even Trump admitted, what did he say? It was like 80 drones at the same time or something. I remember him saying something about that.
Yeah, but Trump's mouth is a random word generator at this point. He's like a large language model gone bad. It's just like...
Well, that's a really interesting thing I want to ask you about too. And also I want to ask you about the scientists disappearing. But I've started to make the announcement. I've been very hard on Trump, lost a lot of supporters because of it. But the behavior model of Trump now starts to look a lot like the Biden behavior model.
Yeah.
And so that goes to the Praetorian Guard intelligence community through drugs and doubles and queuing. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, there are some similarities with Biden just in terms of cognition, but I would say that the bigger issue is that Trump seems to be operating from an assumption that the U.S. is still the dominant military force in the world and that no one can resist our military. And that's just simply no longer true. Obviously, it's been demonstrated by Iran.
He keeps demonstrating it every day.
It's demonstrated every day. But it was also demonstrated by Russia since 2022 with the whole NATO war against Russia, regardless of what weapons that the U.S. sent Ukraine that were said to be, the magical weapons that would change the course of the war, whether it's the HIMARS systems or the Abrams tanks or whatever it was. It always failed. It always failed. And I think that was genuinely a shock to a lot of Western neocons and military people, because they're still living in the past. And I'm sorry, but that's obsolete. All that stuff is obsolete now. Aircraft carriers, like you said, the tanks, you're not going to surprise an enemy anymore. Like, oh, suddenly, a bunch of cruisers and ships showed up. We didn't know they were there. No, everybody's got satellites now. And your ship can't defend itself against a swarm of cheap drones that are fired from inside the mountains and off of people's pickup trucks, Yep. Drones that cost only 20 grand to make. And every missile that you fire at them costs you $2 or $3 million to intercept it. Do the math.
Not only that, but the proxy war that Russia and China are fighting via Iran by giving them real-time space-based data is going to devolve to proxy groups. Right now, it's a nation state, but later on, it's going to be proxy groups, I think, and that's going to change. Just like when you get to real micro drone swarms controlled by AI.
And look at just speedboats. Iran still has hundreds of speedboats in the caves, the shoreline caves, whatever. Those haven't been destroyed. You can load up a mine on a speedboat. You just cruise out there and you drop off a mine. I mean, the U.S. can't stop it. It's not difficult, and also Iran has like mini submarines and things like that haven't been destroyed either. This is the age of small, decentralized swarm tactics that can halt the entire U.S. military. That's where we are. And everybody's recalibrating because of this. China is recalibrating, looking at this.
We're starting to see the motor oil shortage in America. Fertilizer shortages coming. I talk to Michael Yon weekly, probably. He's still predicting famine for Europe, but I don't see famine for America anytime soon, although things are going to get harder just because America is so vast and individual communities and farmers are so resourceful. But what do you think?
Well, to be clear, Michael Yon definitely predicts famine for North America. I've been a lot more cautious on that kind of prediction. I've said that food will become more expensive, and the choices of food will be narrowed significantly. The real issue, as I see it, is going to be reduced crop yields because of much higher costs of fertilizer, and then much higher cost of diesel fuel for transportation and for tractors and farm equipment. So the thing about food prices going much, much higher is that for some people who are just barely able to survive financially, that equals starvation for those people, but for economic reasons. It's not that the food isn't available, it's just they can't afford it. So in order to be able to eat, they have to let go of something else, like paying rent. So they move into their van down by the river, but they can still buy some kind of cheap food and not starve to death. I think we're going to see a lot of those kinds of decisions. We're going to see hungry Americans not falling over dead from starvation by the millions, but rather being displaced out of their homes or their vehicles, or having to make other economic choices that are extremely difficult for them. Selling off all their assets, things like that, just to be able to eat. That's what I see coming.
Well, that goes along with the depopulation for repopulation that's been going on for a long time. But it also starts to look a lot like the English-Irish potato famine model. Is that a good analogy there?
Well, I would say it's a little bit different, because at that time it was such monoculture that was in place there that led to that, and people didn't have the resources they have in terms of access to information and transportation that we have today. But more, I see this as an economic famine, people not being able to afford to eat. And a lot of what will happen, there will be food replacements. So people will move from foods that they want to eat, such as meat, typically meat, cheese, milk, animal products, and they'll have to shift into much lower cost sources of protein, such as peas. So I even did a podcast called Pea Porridge Hot, Pea Porridge Cold, Pea porridge in the pot 9 days old. You've heard that rhyme. That's based on history, because that's what a lot of families lived on in medieval Europe, was pea porridge. because that's all you had for protein. And when you get into that kind of scenario, you get a lot of nutritional deficiencies. You get people who are zinc deficient, copper, selenium, sulfur deficient, etc. And then you start to get the plagues because of immune collapse. So one thing leads to another, and that's where we're headed.
Oh, you said zinc deficient. So that Dr. Zelensky said zinc solves hantavirus and a whole lot of other things that
absolutely
not being contagious, but they could make it look that way if everybody is zinc contagious or zinc deficient rather.
That is, I just released a podcast on this very point, talking about the weaponization of food aid to the countries that experience famine. So the food that will be sent to those countries will be heavily refined processed food that's nutrient depleted. And then that will destroy their immune systems. And then if they get hit with a spike protein or a chemical weapon or fungal spores in the atmosphere, anything like that, then they'll have a mass die-off because they're highly, highly vulnerable. So the weaponization of food through nutrient depletion followed by a binary weapon release will kill off or could kill off even 1 billion people.
Wow. Wow. Well, this has been very informative and very helpful. I know you got a hard stop to go elsewhere, but just wrap up and summarize what you see the rest of the year, and then what do you see predicting for the next decade, I guess?
Well, the U.S. is the most insulated from the effects that will hit the rest of the world first. So you're gonna see famine very soon in places like Bangladesh, energy scarcity in the Philippines. You're going to see hunger in Yemen, even in Egypt and in India. India is going to get hit hard because of the lack of fertilizer. So you're going to hear about a lot of problems over there, but in the U.S., things are going to look normal for a few more months, probably. But then at some point, if the Strait of Hormuz stays closed, then the U.S. starts suffering the fuel shortages, the food inflation I mentioned, and also the engine oil lubricants shortage that will affect transportation and will lead to a rapid collapse of the society that we know. But that won't happen for several more months, and things could turn around before then. Although I don't see Trump walking away and allowing Iran to assert control over the strait, but I also don't see Iran ever surrendering control to the U.S. So that's why wars are fought, when the two sides absolutely cannot agree. One side, kinetic engagement until it's decided. That's probably where this is going.
Well, that's because Netanyahu and Greater Israelism is running that show. And so they'll just keep going as much as it works. They don't care how it works out for the United States, because it works out fine for Israel.
That's right. Yeah. Even if the U.S. is weakened in the process, that's still fine with Netanyahu.
That's actually part of the plan, is Christians and Muslims are weakened for the one world government. But I want to tell you everything you know already. Well, thanks so much for coming on. This has been really helpful and informative. And where would you like people to follow you most?
Thank you, Jeffrey. Yeah, people can follow my videos and analysis at brightvideos.com, or my articles are at naturalnews.com. And I've got new articles every day and new videos and interviews every day. And I'll put this video on brightvideos.com also.
Cool. I will send it to you, and I post your stuff all the time. I resource it all the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeffrey. God bless you.
Good to see you. God bless.
Okay.
Okay, there is the great Mike Adams visiting, and really insightful. I learned so much. I hope you did as well. And his insight into the AI data center collection was a big eye-opener for me, and the AI arms race. And so I really wanted to have him on so I would understand it better. So I hope you do too. As well. Give me some of that. Mike, you rock. He certainly does. And he, like me, are one of the few that are very throttled and haven't been gotten to. So we did cover, the data centers. We covered Trump versus China. or Trump versus Xi, China versus the U.S. We did not get to, so I'll touch on briefly Netanyahu saying no more U.S. aid, but I want a partnership, which Netanyahu said recently on 60 Minutes, we don't want to get more U.S. aid. But then, and they kind of edited out, we want to do a partnership because we want to share intelligence and weaponry, the things we're expert in. Well, what that means is they want to control us even more than they do, which would be hard to imagine because IDF is in the Pentagon. Supposedly, they're going to have a place in the new ballroom, fusion center, situation room, whatever that's going to be. And of course, we are in this war because of Netanyahu. Personally, because his corruption trial is on hold while he's a wartime commander-in-chief. The trial's on hold, but politically, so that they can expand the Greater Israel concept, which I have already biblically shown to be false as well. But that's what he's saying is no more U.S. aid, but a partnership, which really, I think, translates to ownership. The other thing is Congresswoman BOEBERT has confirmed there is an Epstein class cannibalism that has gone on. And that is really very telling because that hasn't been played up much at all. Yeah, we've all heard about Epstein, and of course, nothing much has been released. But now we have a Congresswoman, BOEBERT, somebody in Congress, confirming that cannibalism did go on. Of course, I've already said that for a long time. But she says that she stunned Newsmax after reviewing the unredacted Epstein documents, because there was a few, maybe a half a dozen congressmen that actually reviewed the documents. It's far darker than anyone could have imagined. Emails about torture, constant references to consumption, a place literally called the Cannibal Restaurant, and code words like jerky and human meat being tossed around. You got to refrigerate that because there's a lot of problems if you do eat. If you are a cannibal, there's lots of things that go wrong with you. That's something that a lot of people have postulated about Hillary, for example. She directly asked whether we are dealing with cannibalism, with the threat of human consumption. This is no longer some fringe theory. A sitting member of Congress is openly saying what no one else dares to say. These monsters not only abused and trafficked children, which means they kidnapped, raped, tortured, and then murdered them, but they ate them as well. They are monsters, all of them. But they're covering all of this up. Why? Because it is way too evil to even address. That's what you see with Fox, with Newsmax, with CNN. They're not going to really expose Pedo Joe as a pedo, because if they did, they're exposing the presidency, even though he's the former president, even though he stole the election. They're going to cover for the system because the system is how that runs them. The IDF also was caught bombing another school, this one run by nuns. Recent reports indicate that the Israeli military targeted a religious site in southern Lebanon, including a convent run by nuns in the town of Yarun and a Catholic school in the city of Nabita. And this is something that they keep doing. Why? Because they want to wipe out Christianity, particularly Catholicism. Why Catholicism in particular? Again, because Protestantism sponsors evangelical Zionism. Evangelical Zionism is a subset of Protestantism, but that's where it comes from as well. But I really also want to read you my new Substack. Just published it. This is a paid Substack, so please go to Jeffrey Prather, Substack.com and join. But the Lincoln Memorial, so I'm talking about the new Don Colossus, the solid gold statue of Trump that was just unveiled. The Lincoln Memorial, it is not. But neither is it the golden calf that everyone is saying it is. What it is a psyop solidified, memorialized in gold-leafed bronze as a truth. And now we are supposed to buy it. A 22-foot golden statue of Donald Trump, dubbed Don Colossus, was unveiled at Trump National Doral, Miami in early May 2026, with the ceremony taking place on May 6th. And it's funny because almost no media covered this whatsoever. The bronze statue, coated in gold leaf and weighing 3.1 tons, depicts Trump raising his fist in a pose echoing his appearance after the 2024 assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania. That's key. The statue was commissioned by cryptocurrency investors promoting the meme coin Dollar Patriot and created by Ohio sculptor Alan Cottrill, who initially struggled to receive full payment, but noted the gold leaf suggestion was immediately embraced. This is also what has happened recently with the Trump phone. Over 500,000 people deposited $100 for the Trump phone. And in the fine print, it says, well, you may not get anything at all. And they have not. So the Trump phone looks like a complete scam. And it evidently is one of many. Pastor Mark Burns, a longtime spiritual advisor to Trump, led the dedication ceremony, blessing the statue and insisting it was not a golden calf, but a symbol of resilience, freedom, and patriotism. So it's very interesting that he has to say it's not a golden calf. So if it's not a golden calf, then why do you have to say it's not a golden calf? Of course, the golden calf represents the Israelites turning away from Moses while he's up on the mountain getting the commandments. And it's interesting that they blessed the statue. It's also interesting that the evangelical Zionists hate the statuary of Mary and Jesus, and the Israeli IDF soldiers knocking the crucifixes down. The crucifix has Jesus, the cross doesn't. But this statue is fine. Of course, we have the Lincoln Memorial, which is a lot classier than the Trump statue. But beyond that is something else that I want to get into. Trump called the event and later promoted it on Truth Social, calling it the real deal, gold, despite the statue not being made of solid gold. The Lincoln Memorial, it is not. But neither is it the golden calf that it is being accused of. I don't think people are worshiping it, although they are blessing it. It is gaudy, but it does serve a purpose. The pose is from Butler, right after the failed sniping attempt. A successful sniping attempt, successful sniping is a force multiplier psyop for the sniper and the force behind the sniper. Kill one, terrify 1,000. Or if televised, like Charlie Kirk's sniping assassination, even though it was likely the microphone, terrify hundreds of thousands. The sniping is more than just a shooting. There is a message attached with every round. Get in line, stand down, shut up, or you're next. This was clearly the message with JFK and Charlie Kirk. See our power? No matter how important or well guarded you are, we can get you, touch you, kill you, and yours. So fall in line or else. But a failed attempt, or two, or three, has the opposite effect. The sniper and the powers behind the sniper and backing the sniper are seen as not all powerful. They are flawed by their failures, by their multiple failures. They are not all powerful. The sniper attempt fail has the opposite effect on the survivor. The survivor is the stronger, the tougher, the smarter than the sniper or snipers. As the sniper's image diminishes for missing, the sniper's survivor builds for surviving. The more failed attempts, the greater the survivor's image becomes, until he is seen as untouchable, unkillable, bigger than life, like a god. In the film, The Man Who Would Be King, Sean Connery is hit by an arrow that sticks in a leather vest he wears underneath his coat. But the mountain tribesmen cannot see the vest, so they think he is a god. Connery eventually has the arrow gold-plated and carries it everywhere. Makes one wonder, will Trump's next setup be sniping by arrow? But the message of the statue goes beyond the figure itself. The usual evangelical and Jewish Zionist crowd was there, if not worshipping the graven image, certainly applauding it. Graven meaning carved. That's what the actual commandment says. Not just images, but carved images. But it was Brock Pierce who cut the ribbon at the unveiling of the 22-foot golden statue of Donald Trump, titled Don Colossus, at Trump's Miami area golf resort. The Colossus, by the way, was a giant statue that didn't actually straddle the harbor, as it is often portrayed, but overlooked the harbor. Anyway, Pierce was friends with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. In Pierce's 2012 email exchange with Epstein, he wrote, "I had a great time with the girls. Hope they did too. Thanks." Trump's message could not be any more plain. Not only will he not prosecute Epstein and the Epstein class, he will protect them, and even more, honor them, just as long as they honor him. Trump is a messiah, but only and always to the Epstein class. That's my new Substack. Please subscribe to it at jeffreyprather.substack.com, I believe it is. Also subscribe to my new YouTube channel that I've put in the notes as well. And of course on Rumble and X as well. So remember, the conspiracy continues even as it collapses. Chemistry can't DNA code, but a code clearly indicates a coder. Not one Australopithecine is transitional. So ape evolution is over. But not scientists' superstitions concreted from kinder to college. Science ciphers cell law, but has never created a single cell. But natural laws mandate a lawgiver. A creature is part of a creation, and a creation bespeaks a creator. Anyone can analyze a cake's ingredients, but only the maker can tell you why. CRISPR only cuts, it can't create. Segregation supplanted slavery. Integration, segregation. Now, integration gives way to disintegration, as binary boasts non-binary BS. Darwinism died when microscopes made out mini-cell machines, and fossil records predate and fossils record predators in mid-bite. Draggies don't bear children. They consume them. All is still, born of woman, seeded by man. Trannies are castrate, incels, eunuchs. Nothing plus nothing still equals nothing. But nothing plus God equals everything.